by Mark WilsonGetty Images. All senior White House staffers duty-bound to serve President Donald Trump have, at one point in their tenure, stood in front of a crowd of reporters and delivered untruths to cover for their boss, a ritualistic torching of their integrity, as it were. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson was forced to dodge accusations that he had called Trump a moron. National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, meanwhile, had to defend Trump after the president shared another spy agency's intel with Russian officials. It was only a matter of time before Chief of Staff John Kelly's turn arrived, and arrive it did, with Kelly unexpectedly taking the podium during a press briefing Thursday to exculpate Trump after he was accused of mishandling a phone call to a grieving war widow. Standing before the press, Kelly used his position as a four-star general who has lost a son in battle to take Florida Congresswoman Frederica Wilson to task, saying he was heartbroken by her comments criticizing the president, and accusing her of bragging about appropriating money for an FBI building, a claim that was disproved hours later, when video of Wilson's speech was released. Plenty of Trump staffers have doubled down on more egregious falsehoods. Beleaguered former press secretary Sean Spicer comes to mind, but to hear the claims coming from the sterling four-star general was a departure. Kelly, after all, entered the White House as part of a contingent of sober grown-ups, and reportedly felt duty-bound to restrain Trump when he supplanted Reince Priebus as chief of staff. Hopes rose that Kelly's military discipline and love of country would keep the president in line. He has a lot of credibility, presidential historian Douglas Brinkley told The Washington Post at the time. Trump better not double-cross him. The integrity is so high. That reputation held after Trump's Charlottesville press conference and speech at the United Nations, where Kelly was photographed staring dourly at the ground in apparent shame. As my colleague Gabriel Sherman reported last week, Kelly is miserable in his job but has remained out of a sense of duty, while carefully eyeing an eventual exit strategy. But after Wilson told reporters that Trump had upset the widow of slain Southerly David Johnson, saying of her late husband, "I'm sure he knew what he was signed up for," Kelly took it upon himself to defend the president. Rather than delivering boilerplate condemnations, he leaned into his own experience as a father of a slain soldier to attack Wilson, who had heard Trump call Johnson's family, and relayed his comments to the public. "I just thought the selfless devotion that brings a man or women to die on the battlefield, I just thought that might still be sacred." A visibly emotional Kelly said, describing how his first reaction, upon hearing Wilson's remarks, was to take refuge at Arlington National Cemetery. "I hope, as you write your stories, let's not let this last thing that is sacred, a young man or woman giving his or her life for country, let's somehow keep that sacred. It eroded a great deal yesterday by the selfish behavior of a member of Congress." Kelly then called Wilson's integrity into question, saying that, during the dedication ceremony for a building honoring two slain FBI agents, she had bragged in a speech about how she got the money for the building. A congresswoman stood up, and in a long tradition of empty barrels making the most noise, stood up there in all of that and talked about how she was instrumental in getting the funding for that building, and how she took care of her constituents because she got the money, and she just called up President Obama, and on that phone call, he gave the money, the $20 million, to build the building, and she sat down. The facts, however, are slightly different. A video of Wilson's full speech revealed that she'd spent the majority of the ceremony praising the two agents. Nevertheless, Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders stood by Kelly's statements on Friday, saying, without evidence, that Wilson had made similar comments at another point that same day. She ended with an ominous statement, "If you want to get into a debate with a four-star Marine general, I think that's something highly inappropriate." Overall, Kelly's motivations were unclear, though Wilson and the media quickly voiced their takes. "John Kelly's trying to keep his job," Wilson told Politico shortly after his press conference. "He will say anything. There were other people who heard what I heard." Whether reports of Kelly's dissatisfaction really did prompt the eerily Tillerson-esque press conference, or whether Kelly was motivated by a personal sense of injury on behalf of the military, the cumulative effect was to help Trump immensely instead of focusing on the unnerving fact that 4 U.S. soldiers were slain in Niger after being ambushed by 50 members of ISIS, and that the White House took 12 days to address the crisis. The press was roped into covering Trump's newest self-inflicted wound.